Hello, Tech Pros, episode 101.
Are you doing right by your people? And are you tweaking or evolving and managing a consistent process?
Welcome to the podcast where I chat with professionals who are getting the job done using technology 7 days a week. Each week, we start with Motivation Monday. Tuesday is about productivity. Wednesday, leadership. Thursday, technology. Friday, people and communication. Saturday, entrepreneurship. And Sunday, being unplugged. All right, let's get started.
Hello, Tech Pros. This is Chad Bostic, and I'm excited to introduce our featured guest today, Carson Heady. Happy Wednesday, Carson.
Back at you, Chad. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Great to have you. Carson Heady is a published author of 2 sales books and numerous articles on selling and leadership, who has served at multiple levels of sales management in his career. He's worked in technology, advertising, and telecommunications. Carson lives in St. Louis, Missouri with his wife and daughter. Carson, so glad to have you on the show today. Awesome to meet you.
You as well, Chad. I really appreciate your time today and the opportunity.
Cool. So tell us about, tell us about these books. So you're an author. Have you always been an author? Like, did you start life as a young child, like writing stories and telling stories and typing things out, or is this a new venture for you?
My parents tell me that they put me in front of a typewriter at the age of 3, and I liked to tinker around and write stories, and I would always incorporate my friends into my stories. So it was always kind of a creative passion. It was something that I wanted to do. Obviously, I haven't sold enough books yet to retire, but the experience has been fantastic, and it's mostly because of opportunities to meet people from all over the world, people like yourself, and have good, candid conversation about selling and leadership. And as I got older and I found a passion for sales, I was able to kind of marry those two passions and passion for leadership as well. And it all kind of came together, and I wanted to do something unique because there's a lot of sales and a lot of leadership books that are out there. So I wanted to do something different. So Birth of a Salesman is actually a sales book that's embedded inside of a fictional novel about the fictional author of that book. And I was able to incorporate a lot of things that I've seen over the years and just different experiences. And it's been a fantastic endeavor and journey over the last several years.
Oh, that sounds very interesting. So I'm a big fan of The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, if you've ever read that one. Mm-hmm. Patrick, how do you pronounce his name? Leonassoni or something like that.
Yep.
Yeah, it's what they call a fable, right? Where it's basically a fictional story about leadership and about these 5 dysfunctions that the individual discovers on this management team and helps them all come together. Love that book. So it sounds like yours is similar in style to that?
It's in that vein.
Yeah.
So basically it will go back and forth between the fictional narrative, which is more or less kind of a business / business conspiracy type story. And there's a lot of drama, as there can be sometimes in the workplace, but and then how this character has managed through that. But then also the sales book chapters intersperse. So it goes back and forth between the fictional narrative and then the chapters that he tells. And so it's kind of a 2-part thing to it. And yes, it's similar in that ilk.
Awesome. I've never written anything or published anything, I should say. I've written a lot back when I was a lot younger. So when the movie Red Dawn came out in the 80s, I don't know if you've ever seen that or the remake recently. When that came out, my buddies and all watched it, and one of the guys at school said, "Chad, what would you do if that happened in our school?" And I went, I don't know. And then I started daydreaming about it all day. I started having dreams about it at night, these bad guys parachuting in and doing all kinds of crazy terrorist stuff at the school. And so in 7th or 8th grade, I started writing a story about it. It basically changed all the characters up to me and my friends and how we had to save the day.
I love that. In fact, it's funny because I actually used to do the same thing, and I would incorporate. I was a huge Back to the Future fan. In fact,
yes.
I got married on October 21st, 2015.
Nice.
At exactly 4:39 p.m. So it was I'm a huge Back to the Future fan, and I used to write time travel stories and space stories, and of course my friends and I were the cast of characters, so I can completely relate. And I think one of the things that it stops a lot of us, because I believe that a lot of us think about writing and about what it would take to make a book, and it's quite a task, and it's very challenging, and it's also very challenging to get published and find the right publisher and to follow that process, but my biggest advice is just write and just contribute, just like anything, contribute a little bit to it every single day, and eventually you'll have your masterpiece.
Man, that's such great stuff, and I think that can apply to anything, right? Whether it be writing or whether it be, I don't know, starting a podcast like we're doing here, or developing a new product or a new service for your business. You just gotta work on it. You just gotta put it out there.
Yeah, I work with a lot of different business. I've worked with a lot of business owners and just different professionals in my career, and personally, I've challenged myself. I try to write an article or at least contribute something every single day. And it's funny because when you think about it, like, hey, I'd love to write an article every day for the next 6 months. Well, that seems kind of daunting. But if you actually just go out and do it, and even just schedule time for yourself to do these things that you want to do, that will and not even necessarily just enhance your brand, but also will open up your creative, your creative motions. I think exploring stuff like that is great. And then you're able to look back, and even if you didn't do it every day for 6 months, you look back and you're like, heck, I did it 2/3 of the time, and that's better than not doing it at all. And so I think that's what a lot of us grapple with. It's this, you've got to take each day at a time and just contribute something to it each day.
Yeah, we had an episode on a few weeks ago where we talked about turning your goals into habits, and that's exactly along the same lines, Carson, which is, whatever goal that you want to do. If you want to write a book, if you want to publish a whole bunch of articles, you just spend a few minutes on it every single day and see if you can turn it into a habit, because if you do something a couple hundred times in a row consistently, then you're going to get to where you stop thinking about it and just, oh yeah, I got to sit down and do my thing, and boop, you cranked it out, and then move on.
It's true of everything. It's true of, finding your routines throughout the day, devoting time to exercise if that's your thing, or devoting time to spending time with your family. You make the time to do these things. And it's the same with writing, and it's the same with enhancing your business, and it's the same with, growing your aptitudes. You may be studying for classes or, taking certifications at your job or whatever it is. You just make the time and carve that out. And it's very possible if you apply to it.
Awesome. Great stuff. Well, speaking of making the time, Carson, today is the day where we make the time to talk about leadership. And specifically, the first leadership story that I always want to get out, not to pick on anybody, not to name names, not to throw people under the bus, but I love to resonate with my guests and talk about horrible bosses. And the reason I like to do that is because we're all human. We've all had these bad experiences where we're working with somebody that, maybe they were a great boss for other people's personalities, but maybe just a horrible boss from our perspective. But I really want to learn from that and have my audience learn from, what are examples of horrible leadership or horrible bosses. And then we'll kind of flip the tables in just a minute and talk about what great leadership means to you and how we can get there. So Carson, tell us that personal story from your perspective of who was the most horrible boss that you've ever worked for.
Yeah, I think everybody probably has somebody that stands out in their mind. And, I think that the character traits that really could be attributed in that situation were, and I also want to avoid cliches, because I think a lot of times we talk about micromanagement in these types of situations. And I think micromanagement is an overused term. I think micromanagement, if you think about it, it's excessive attention to minute details or minutia. And I think it's bandied around way too often. But in this case, I think micromanagement and being overly controlling, like as in skipping levels to try to manage my team of sales managers that I led at the time, not following. There are two things that I really boil down as the most important functions in leadership, and it's people and it's process. And there's a lot of uncontrollables. And I think the poor leader will attempt to control everything and will not allow, because again, if you're in a position, and this is true of anyone on what I call the sales food chain, you've earned the right to be in that position. And people are going to do things in a different way. So I think one of the other things that really characterized this person was they didn't allow people to do things their own way and find their own way of being successful. It was kind of this person's way or the highway. And lack of respect. Respect is so important. I've never been able to foster a good relationship in sales leadership that didn't start with gaining and showing respect. You've got to know your people, and this person didn't. They didn't know the motivations. They didn't know how to get people to want to work for them. There's a lot of people that lead through fear and intimidation, and that was definitely this person. And those types of things, while they will get people to do just enough to survive in some situations, or they just flat out leave, good people at that, it really does not foster the type of working environment that is at the optimum of success. And I think that has really, I learned a ton from that situation because, and it's, again, it sounds cliche, but it showed me what not to do. I think one of the key things, again, is not just that respect piece, but also the ability to really go out and support your people. And this person was not supportive. I think our role as leaders is to come in and remove legitimate obstacles to people's success, but also be able to wade through the excuses, because there's a lot of excuses that you get. And I think as you develop that relationship and you develop that respect level, you can see what's an excuse and you can see what's a legitimate obstacle. And even if you can't fix everything, you got to go in and do as much as you can. And this person didn't do those things. And so seeing that and just knowing what that dynamic was like, it's something that I would never want anyone to feel for me as a leader.
Man, that's painful, but so true. I see this, or I hear these stories about these command and control managers all the time, and I'm trying to figure out, I'm trying to rationalize in my head why these individuals are like this, why they exhibit these behaviors. And is it because that's the way they were trained? That's the way they were brought up? Is it because of insecurities in them? And I'm trying to think, are there good places to have it? And the only ones I can think of are, sometimes like a drill sergeant, like literally command and control. Like I will break the team down, break all these individuals down because I want to build them back up as a team. In the military to make everyone a focused unit, but that's just, for the first few weeks of boot camp, right? And then I think of in emergency situations where we need to get everyone's attention and hey, everyone follow my lead. We're exiting the building because there's an emergency going on, right? And you have to step away from your desk, follow me because it's live or die time, right? But in normal everyday business, that kind of forcibly, you have to do it my way or the highway, that just sucks. It sucks to be under, and I would hate to be that individual that just feels the need to constantly boss people around and order people around to do it my way instead of just allowing them to find their own creative approach.
Well, and let's be frank, Chad, there's a lot of, I think poor leadership begets poor leadership. And, we talk a lot of times about sales analogies, 20% of your top sellers typically carry, a team or an office or a division. I think the same can be said for leadership. And there's a lot of, poor leaders out there, but it's not always necessarily their fault either. I think anytime you're in a management sales rep or a senior manager type dynamic, again, it's the sales food chain. It's just like your relationship with the customer. It starts with that mutual respect and being of value to the other party, but you're in a contract. And you owe that person that is, maybe your subordinate or your customer, you owe them all the support in the world in order to flourish. And I think a lot of leaders don't necessarily understand that because their leader didn't show them the same courtesy. So there's a lot of situations where there are poor managers just because nobody's ever shown them the ropes or how to do it. And then there's some that, I hate to say that there are some that are out there that do it out of malice or out of the power going to their head, but I think those do exist as well. I think that anytime you set foot into a management type role, your initial goal is you want to get these folks to like you. You want to get them to follow you, and I think sometimes they do just because of the newness of the situation. But that wears off, and that's where the consistency is the most important thing, and that's why it harks back again to people and process. And there are constant checks and balances and tweaks that have to be made, and adaptations and evolutions. But some managers don't know how to wade through all of that. And that's why you'll have some of them that'll come out, they'll do great at first, and then they plummet. You'll have some that come out at first, and they want to be nice, and they want to go the extra mile. But then after a lot of disappointment, and after things are not going their way because they haven't really established a foundation, they start to lose their grip, and they don't know how to handle it. So they freak out, and they have a knee-jerk reaction, and they come down on their team, or they make these drastic changes in policy, and that's when it goes south. Because those types of behaviors are not going to get you the consistency that ultimately you want. But a lot of these leaders, they don't know how to get it. And I think that's where it begins, is nobody's really showed them how to do it.
So let's show everybody how right here. So let's flip it around. So instead of focusing on the negative behaviors, let's talk about the more positive behaviors, or how to get to that consistent level of leadership where we want where our teams want to follow us, where they are inspired by us, and where we can be consistent every single day but still get the results that we want. So what are the first steps to getting there?
It's a great question. And I think it's true whether you're stepping into a new role or whether you're taking on a new team or any of those types of things. I think there's always a preconceived notion. And I think there's a preconceived notion of sellers and of managers in any type of situation, any type of workplace dynamic. There's always a preconceived notion that you're going to act as a new manager a certain way, that you're going to come in, make a lot of rule changes and things like that. And I personally have found that doing sometimes the opposite of that, or doing what they don't expect, is what's going to get their attention. But number one is the most important thing is getting to know your people. What makes them tick? What are their motivations? What do they want to achieve? What are their strengths and areas of opportunity? You don't want to come in and start giving them feedback and telling them to change things right away, because you don't know them. They're going to be put off by that because their thought is going to be exactly, and it's going to be justified. How can he or she tell me to change this or do this when we just met? So personally, I think the most important thing is get in there, spend time with your people, doing the job that they do. And if you haven't done that job previously, understand as much of it as you can, because again, your whole goal is to support them and remove legitimate obstacles to their success. So you want to get their feedback, because ultimately you don't want to make drastic process changes. But what you do want to do is actually fashion what is going to be the process going forward. So we talked about our people, we talked about our process. Those are the two most important things. But in fashioning the process, you want your people's buy-in on what that process is going to be. And if they have made or feel that they have made contributions toward what that process is going to look like, they're going to buy in because they're part of it. It's a team effort, not just you coming in as the boss saying, this is how things are going to be. It's going to get the foundation set because you know your people, you know what makes them tick. The next part of it is really selling your team on why, selling your team on process. I've had a lot of times where I've had meetings with managers, with sales reps, with people in technology, with different project managers, with IT folks, bringing them in and being able to say, okay, here's what the current process has looked like. We've got to jointly identify what are our strengths and also what are our areas of opportunity to improve. And we've also got to agree on the game plan. Now, there is what I like to call comfortable ways of mediocrity and comfortable ways of failing. I think if we're not hitting a mark or we're not getting the results that we need to be getting, whether it's as a manager, as a team member, whatever the case may be, it's very easy to fall back on these comfortable ways of mediocrity or comfortable ways of failing. It's what we're used to doing. So to change that, it's just like anything. to make a change is sometimes a little bit painful, and it's daunting, and we're fearful of it. So you've got to ultimately sell change. You've got to make them more afraid of the ramifications of staying on their current course rather than being afraid of making a change to their process. And a lot of times they mean well, they'll go out, they may change their process, do it for a day or so, and it's uncomfortable, and they don't get the result immediately that they want. So they revert back to these comfortable ways of mediocrity and failing. That's why it's so important as a leader to stay at the pulse of that and really figure out, why are they continuing down this path? And you've got to, again, revisit that. And I think the final part of it as a leader is being able to assess and address what is past and present, comparing the two. Here's what we did the last time. This is what we talked about. This is what we felt. This is what we agreed upon. This is the course of action we plotted out. Now, have we done it or have we not done it? And if we haven't, why? And what do we need to do to change that course and to right the ship in this case? So I think those are, and it's constant, because as soon as you take your eye off one ball, something else will pop up. And especially if you're managing large teams, you have a diverse group of people and personalities that you've got to make sure you understand all of their motivations, and you've got to be able to lead in some cases similar, and treat everybody similarly in some regards, and differently in the ones that where they really stand out and need to be coached differently. So, but I think those are the fundamentals of building a foundation for leadership: knowing your people, figuring out what is the right process, and then managing to the process while you're taking care of your people. And I'm going to use those words a lot, people and process, because that's what it all comes down to.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree with that. It's all about, first of all, the people that are on the team, the people that are doing the work to get things done, those individual contributors, whether they're in sales or whether they're in IT or whether they're other leaders who are leading the individual contributors. Those folks are getting the job done, whether it's selling things or building things or plugging things together or managing customer relations, whatever it is. They are the ones tasked with really operating and driving the ship, right? Driving the company. And it is us as leaders to make sure that they are empowered to do those jobs to the best of their ability. So, Carson, in just a moment, I want to ask you about, how we can get this buy-in specifically. When we have a lot of different, especially in sales and in IT, in technology, we have some of these people are very high performers. They're very, very smart individuals, and they have their own ideas and directions on, where we should go and how we should get there. So in just a minute, I want to ask you about what we can do to kind of align their vision to ours and get everybody moving in the same direction. But first, we're going to take a quick break and thank our sponsors. This episode of Hello Tech Pros is sponsored by Burdine. Siri and OK Google are fun for party tricks, but 97% of smartphone users don't like talking to their phones in public. It's kind of weird. When was the last time you were at the mall and heard someone say, "Siri, what's my wife's dress size?" Or, "OK Google, where did I park my car?" Some things are better left unspoken. Burdine remembers the things you care about and reminds you discreetly through text messages. Names, dates, places, ideas, to-do lists. Burdine never forgets and is always there to remind you. You don't need to install an app, just text Burdine a statement and she'll remember. Text her a question and she'll answer. Burdine is the only contact you have to have on your phone. Meet Burdine at burdine.com. That's BURDENE.com, or text Burdine to 480-418-1411. Outside the U.S., be sure to use the country code +1. So for non-U.S. residents, text +1 480-418-1411 with a message Burdine. Okay, we're back with Carson Heady. We've been talking to Carson about the leadership process, and by that, it's really diving into the people and the process that's going on in the organization. First of all, the people are, not to be cliche as we've talked about, but people are the most important thing about the organization. And so you really have to understand the individuals as individuals that are on the team. And second of all, understand the process that they're using or lack of process that they're using to get the job done. And just look for improvements, but not just pull those improvements out of the hat, but really talk to those individuals, learn about their jobs, learn what obstacles are in their way, learn what they're struggling with, and then take those lessons learned and adjust the process, make incremental changes to move things forward, but then do it in such a way that you get buy-in from the entire team. Now, Carson, as you mentioned before, sometimes we have the top 20% of our staff is really carrying the whole division, right? They're really, really top-level performers that are knocking things out and getting things done. Unfortunately, sometimes they're going in different directions, right? Those top 20% are heading in two different directions or three different directions. And what we need to do is pull everybody together, that top 20% and then everybody else in the division, all moving in the same direction. So what are some tips and tricks we can do to get everybody into alignment when some of the top people have different directions on where we should go?
That's a fantastic question, Chad. And it comes down to, again, it starts at the beginning and the foundation and the culture that you as a leader develop and set the stage for. And it's not to say that you can't personally evolve and make changes later on. It's easier if you do it when you first encounter the situation. But one thing that I will say is everyone that you lead has their own goals and aspirations. Now, one of them may be just to hold down a seat and keep their job. Some of them want to take over the company, and that's great. There's room for both. But there are certain ways that if they fear losing their seat or if they fear their career stalling and not getting to the place that they want, they will make changes to address where their career trajectory is going. Now, it's not to say that you're leading through fear, because what you've done is you've understood, okay, this is what this person needs. This is what this person is after. And I'll tell you, as a manager, I've seen a lot of different leadership styles, and I've seen, where if somebody doesn't have a chance at getting a promotion, theoretically, they don't even get an interview for it. Now, my school of thought is that if somebody's interested, and obviously time permitting, because you don't have time to do 100 interviews for every position, but if you've got somebody who's got some tenure, they've been there for a while, you appreciate their contribution, give them a shot. Give them at least a conversation and be frank with them, because I think transparency is another thing that's sadly lacking. If you are transparent, and we talked a little bit about this earlier, Chad, as far as you're not always able to move mountains for every request that your team makes. Ideally, you're just like the fire department and the police department. You're there to serve and protect, in my opinion. You're there to serve your team, be of value, be of support. But they're going to ask you for things that maybe even are legitimate concerns that you're not going to be able to change, because there's a lot of different levels of bureaucracy that you've got to go through, and sometimes it's not feasible. But if they see you trying, and they see occasionally you will get some wins, they will see that and they will believe that you are there to support them and they will work for you. Now, as far as actually getting their specific buy-in, I think that's part of it, but I think the other part of it is looking at if somebody wants to advance or they want to make more money or they want to move into another aptitude, being able to actually meet with them. And just like I was talking about before, like other parts of that sales food chain, being able to actually listen, I think that's one thing that's really missing, is just actually hearing your team and actually hearing what they have to say, what they want to do, and incorporating that into what your feedback is. I think so many of us, and it's easy to get caught up in it because, like I was saying before, sometimes you don't always have the best of leaders yourself. So they may be telling you, hey, you need to do more of this. You need to produce more of this. You need more result in this area. But they're not telling you how to do it. So what you need to be able to incorporate yourself, whether you're being shown how to do it or not, is to meet with your team, figure out what's the current status, look at where we've been, where are we, and what do we need to do to get to the trajectory that you want? And each time you're recalibrating, each time you're meeting, whether it's weekly or biweekly or monthly, you're looking at, okay, last time this is what we discussed. This is where we were. This is the plan we agreed upon. Have we executed on it or not? And if not, why not? And if we have executed on it, that's awesome. Congratulations. Because another part of this is recognition and being able to give positive feedback. Because again, you can give constructive criticism as much as you want, and it can be very helpful, and you can also have the most you could be very well-intentioned. But if you're never praising your team at all or giving them any kind of positive reinforcement or telling them, and hey, that's a great job. I mean, we're headed in the right direction. But hey, what's the next step? What's the next plan? Because yes, we've done X, Y, Z, but we've got to now do A, B, C. And I believe if we do those things, we'll be on the right path. So the buy-in comes from them seeing you supporting them seeing you caring about their aspirations and where they want to go, them seeing you supporting them every step of the way as well as just a show of support, and being transparent and telling them, hey, you may not have a shot at this promotion right now because frankly, there's 20 people that are up for it. And I know that they're looking for this competency, and this competency, and you're really strong in A and B. C is something we need to develop. So what I'd like to do is definitely get you in for the interview, but even if you don't get it, you can't, and I think that's where a lot of these folks may fold is they don't have that kind of guidance from their leader, but when they don't know how to respond or react either whenever they don't get what they think they want at that moment. Because I've looked back on my career many times and where I thought I wanted something or I thought something was fair or unfair at the time. You have a way of looking back and realizing that everything probably worked out the way it was supposed to. So I think it's important to really stay level-headed and in that moment. But from a leadership standpoint, you get their buy-in by making sure that everyone's on the same page. And again, I think if you have a large team, you also want to make sure that you are collaborative. To sum up, one of the other things that I've tried to incorporate, especially in larger divisions that I've been in, is betterment committees and things where I'm not always necessarily part of it because they need to construct and come up with plans. It's kind of like Congress. They need to construct and come up with plans themselves that are for the betterment of the whole. That you're not always necessarily the one saying, hey, do this, or this is what I think. And then have them present some things, and maybe if they give you 10 things to do, you take the top few that you can get done and you do them. Because like I said, you're not going to be able to do everything they ask for, but if they see that they are part of the process, they're going to buy in.
Man, I love that. Love that approach. And one of the biggest turnaround stories that I have in my personal career, the biggest turnarounds where I saw with an individual that I was leading, there was a situation where there was a group of individuals and their leader had moved on or got a promotion or moved out of the company, and there was a gap in that leadership space. And so a couple of the individuals in that team said, you know what, I think I'm ready to step up and take the leadership position. The overall management decided that they were just going to combine a couple of departments, and they actually combined the department I was leading with that department. And so I was now the leader of both departments, my old team and this new team. And so when I had one-on-ones with the individuals on the team, this one individual at the very beginning of the conversation, or just in the group meetings during the introduction, just seemed very standoffish, you could tell that he was fuming, right? Because not that he didn't get the position, but nobody even talked to him and gave him an interview about the position. They just said, okay, well, we decided that we wanted to merge these two things, and Chad's now the supervisor. And so when I talked to him, I said, hey, I want to know, what are your career aspirations? What do you want to do? And how can I help? And he looked me straight in the eye. He said, Chad, I want your job. And I said, great. That's awesome. What can I do to help you get this job? And he laughed and he said, you don't want to do that. I said, absolutely. I want to do that because I don't want to have this job forever. This is maybe 2 years or 5 years, right? This is a temporary position that I'm going to have. Maybe it's only 6 months. I don't know. Things constantly shift around here, and I want to grow. I want to move into other positions, and I want somebody there that can take the team and run it and go with it well, I'm gone, right? And if that is you, then I want to help you get to that position. So here's what we can do. What ideas do you have about how to make this team better? And he said, well, I've been thinking about XYZ. And I said, perfect. Why don't you put a committee together? And I love what you said about these betterment committees. Put a betterment committee together and get the ideas of the rest of the folks on the team and drive it. Take that change and drive it and implement it across. And man, I've never seen anyone go from just very almost disrespectful, not quite, but getting where it was borderline disrespectful at the first of the conversation to then later in that conversation and 2 weeks later just was the biggest champion on the whole team.
I absolutely love that story. I think that's fantastic. One thing I would say as well is a lot of these folks, they go day to day, and it's so easy to get caught up in that minutia, and they don't see like that beacon of hope, like somebody that comes in and says, hey, I want you to have my job. Please, absolutely take it, because the better that you perform, we all win. We all move up, or we all move to other things and other career aspirations. And I think communication is something that really lacks, being able to just have that conversation that you had, Chad, and, sending, even if it's emails, even if it's a regular correspondence that, you send out a note at the beginning of the day, just kind of recapping yesterday's successes and highlighting people that did well and giving them visibility to upper management, copy your boss. And that way your boss is seeing these guys performing, and these guys are seeing that their boss's boss is seeing that they performed. And then share best practices. When somebody does something phenomenally, there's no reason. A lot of times it doesn't take any food off somebody else's plate on the team to share what that one person did. And so if you're sharing these best practices, these people see their name in lights, and it really will continue to press them forward, and they see themselves on the trajectory rather than just seeing you as somebody who came in and said, oh yeah, I'm going to help you out and I'm going to help you get where you want to be. There's chances are that they've had somebody that paid lip service to that. And it's tough to sometimes continue to get their buy-in because they see you as the same as the old boss.
Right.
So it's vital to be able to get their buy-in, but also to continue to show them that they are appreciated, that they are, their accomplishments are visible to upper leadership. All of those types of things. And I think, it's another cliched saying, but work smarter and not necessarily harder. Find these little touches, these little ways that take maybe I can type a quick email out to my team in 30 seconds and sing somebody's praises. It takes a tiny little part of your day, but it goes such a long way.
Awesome. Great stuff. Well, Carson, I have bought into this message, but we want to make sure that all of our audience is completely bought into this. So before we go, can you share some parting words of wisdom for our audience, the best way that we can connect with you? And then we'll say goodbye.
Absolutely, Chad. And first off, I just want to say thank you so much again for the opportunity. Hopefully it shows that leadership is something that I am extremely passionate about. I think it's so important, for all of us, because all of us in some way are connected to a leader, and a lot of us are leaders. And I think sometimes that's a daunting task. We come in and we want to make an impact, and we want to leave a legacy, and we want to do something that matters, and we want to get somewhere in our career, and we want to help other people. But, sometimes we have to keep from being short-sighted. We have to look at the big picture, and that's challenging. That's very daunting sometimes. So I think my final thought on it is simplify all of that. And again, anytime you're in doubt, it always comes back to people and process. Are you doing right by your people? And are you tweaking or evolving and managing a consistent process? Because again, you're going to be in situations where things are going to change. The economy may affect you, different things that are going on in your organization. There are mergers, and there are all these things that are completely out of your control. But you've got to control what you can control. And what you can control is how you react, how you respond. And again, it all comes down to what's right for your people and what will keep you on the most consistent process. What's the right process today to move forward? And again, that's going to continue to change. So you want to but I think a lot of people think they have to make drastic changes to how they approach things and to what their process is, and they don't. So again, be consistent as you can, make tweaks where they make sense, but make sure your people are a part of that. As far as best ways to connect with me, I am all over and love LinkedIn, and I'm also on Twitter at CV as in Vincent, Heady, Heady 007. I'm a huge James Bond fan, by the way. And I would love to connect with you on either of those mediums. And, this is one of my most passionate topics, sales and leadership. So would definitely look forward to some discussion. I've also got a group that I manage on LinkedIn called the Career Advice Network. It's actually shortened to CAN. So put your topics in the can. But I would definitely love to connect with anyone and everyone on any of those mediums.
Awesome, Carson. Thank you so much for sharing. Tech Pros, if you want to get in touch with Carson, or you want to take a look at his book, or send some advice to the can, you can find all the links to all this information that we've been talking about here today on hellotechpros.com/101. This is episode 101 of Hello Tech Pros. And again, you can find that at hellotechpros.com/101. Carson, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. I really value your insight and appreciate you taking time out of your busy Wednesday to spend time with us.
My absolute pleasure. I had a blast, Chad. Thank you.
You've been listening to Carson Heady, and I'm Chad Bostic. And until next time, take care. The show notes page for this episode can be found at hellotechpros.com/101. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review, subscribe to this channel, and check back tomorrow. This has been Leadership Wednesday, but tomorrow, my featured guest and I talk about technology. On Friday, people and communication. Saturday, entrepreneurship. Sunday, being unplugged. And then next week, we kick it off with Motivation Monday, followed by Tuesday, productivity. And then we're back again on Wednesday to discuss leadership. And I'll talk to you tomorrow.